Welcome to Mom Matters. In this week's Expert Edition, we talk about migraines. Ugh. Okay, even the name gives me a little bit of head pain here. But while both men and women suffer from migraines, it actually tends to be a condition that favors the ladies. So here to explain and offer some guidance is neurologist Dr. Ryan Smith. Dr. Smith, it's so good to see you.
Good to see you too.
Okay, so in full transparency, I'm going to share I suffer from migraines, and I know him very well. But I also found it really important to help people understand what a migraine is and why it's important to treat it, because I find so many women suffer, and when you and I talk, come to find out it is really common in women, right?
Absolutely.
Okay,
Very common.
Well, I want to get more into that in just a moment. But first, though, let's kind of help people understand what's the difference between an actual migraine and just a really bad headache.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think a good rule of thumb to help us understand that would be if you have any head pain that makes you want to lie down in a dark and quiet place and not move, that's probably a migraine at that point.
Okay. And what are some of the symptoms that come along with a migraine?
Yeah, this is extremely variable, but it can be things like nausea, light and sound sensitivity, dizziness, neck pain, fatigue, and a lot of others, actually.
Yeah, dizziness is my friend. I get a lot of dizziness with mine. Okay, and then when most people think of migraines, though, right, they think of the kind of the classic head pain, right, where they're like, oh, my head is just hurting so dang bad, I can't think straight or I can't function. But in some people, though, it can actually manifest, like you'd mentioned, in some of these other symptoms first before the head pain begins, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so let's talk about the different ways that migraine can actually present. Because, I mean, I'll even be even more transparent. In my migraine journey, I didn't know that what I was actually having were actually migraines at first, when I was first diagnosed, like over a decade or so ago. I couldn't figure out why I kept getting dizzy or why I was so nauseous and just couldn't think straight. I was thinking there was something else going on, but it was finally, brought to my attention. You're suffering from migraine. So let's talk about that, because I want to help people who might be suffering and not realizing that they're actually in camp migraine.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, let's maybe start about 24 to 48 hours before you have head pain.
Yes, let's do.
So people can experience dizziness like we talked about. They can have mood changes, food cravings, cognitive changes. Some people have uncontrollable yawning. So these are symptoms that would clue you in, hey, a migraine's coming in the next day or two. Then maybe about an hour before you start having head pain, people can have what's called aura. This is about 30% of people with migraine. These symptoms range from dizziness, like you have. You can have vision changes. You can have muscle weakness, numbness and tingling. There's even a small percentage of people that slowly lose consciousness over time. So it covers a vast range of symptoms.
Wow, okay. Do we know what causes migraine?
Boy, I wish we did.
I know, right? Oh, that's the magical question, right?
Yeah.
Okay, what are some of the theories, though, behind migraine?
Yeah, so we have a bunch of the pieces of the puzzle, but we don't have it all together yet. What we do know is that migraines run in families. Okay. So 90% of people have a family history of migraine. So this brings us to kind of the genetic discussion. But what's interesting is that the genes that cause migraine, say in one family, are not the same genes that cause migraine in another family.
Wow.
So this even varies from region to region, country to country. What happens in Scandinavia for migraine isn't what happens in other countries.
Really?
So this makes finding like one cause very difficult.
Yeah.
So there's some work being done with artificial intelligence. Maybe that can help us bring in all of this data and hone in on something. But right now we just got pieces of the puzzle.
So just pieces, all right. But we do know, though, that there is a bit of a hereditary factor involved in this.
100%.
Okay. What role does stress play in migraines?
Yeah, so here's how you want to think of stress.
Okay.
Stress isn't the cause, it's the trigger.
Got it.
So you have a predisposition to having migraine, and then stress would be that trigger that brings it on.
Got it.
Yeah.
Okay. So while some people, if they have stress, their blood pressure goes up.
Yeah.
People with migraine, you get migraine.
Right.
Okay, all right, so it's your body's response.
Yeah.
Your natural predisposed response to something.
Exactly.
Okay, all right, for women, how common is migraine?
Yeah, so 70% of the people that get migraine are women.
70.
70, yep.
Wow.
And about 40% of women
Okay.
will have a migraine at some point in their life.
Okay.
And then about 20% of women suffer from migraine on just a regular basis. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. And what role does hormones play in migraines?
Yeah, this is a big one.
Okay.
Big role.
Yeah.
Estrogen, as you can probably guess.
Yeah.
So we see migraine happen for women often when their menstrual cycles begin. So this happens in early adolescence. We see, when a woman's going throughout her life, that when their estrogen level falls at the time of menstruation, that's a ripe time for migraine to happen. We also see, interestingly enough, around menopause, migraines can get worse for some women. There's even some women who've never had migraine before who will start having migraine around the time of their menopause.
Okay, and it's likely due to the fluctuation of hormone levels.
That's what we think.
Estrogen.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Again, theory.
Theory.
That's what we think.
Yep.
All right, so at what point do you recommend somebody get help with migraine?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought this up. So I think if someone's suffering from, say, just a couple migraine days a month, it's resolving with over-the-counter medicine, yeah, you probably don't need to see a healthcare provider.
Okay.
But if you're getting into the 4, 5, definitely 6 migraine days a month, that's really a time someone should seek medical attention for that.
Okay, and if somebody is having reoccurring migraines 4, 5, 6 days a month, and they're relying on OTCs, what's the danger of that?
Yeah, there's 2 things on that.
Okay.
So over-the-counter medicines, even though you can buy them over the counter, do carry risk. The medications like ibuprofen, naproxen, aspirin, if someone's using this regularly, over time, it can damage your stomach, lead to bleeding, okay? It can also damage a person's kidneys. Acetaminophen, Tylenol, with regular prolonged use can damage the liver. Now, the second thing on that, if someone's using any of these substances more than 10 days a month, surprisingly, it can actually make their migraines worse.
Oh.
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, you don't want that.
We don't want that.
No, and we don't want any of the organ damage either. I mean, but if you've suffered from migraine, you know, like, wow, okay, maybe that's why I keep having this cycle is because I'm having them reoccurring and I'm relying on the ibuprofen, and it's doing is actually exacerbating the situation. Where there's so many medications now that are actually so helpful, preventative. There's the ER medications. I know this because I see you, right, that you can use that really help you have so many less migraine days. And in some situations, like I can go months without having one,
Yeah.
right? Just depending on what the right fit is for you.
Right.
But getting in and getting that process started now is so important. What about, really quick before we wrap, I want to talk about migraine in adolescence.
Sure.
Because you had mentioned it's 70% of migraine sufferers are women, which typically can start with the onset of menses, which can be teenagers.
Yeah.
So what's the importance if you are a parent and you suspect that your teen may be suffering from migraines? Why is it important that we get our teens looked at early with this?
Yeah, early prevention is so important for this. Migraine is so much easier to treat when it's infrequent, when it's episodic.
Okay.
When it starts becoming more chronic, it's a lot more challenging to treat. So get in there early, get it treated, be aggressive.
Okay. And what's the potential of, especially when you're young and if you're on a preventative medication, is there, a potential down the road that maybe it might even dissipate at some point?
Yeah, absolutely. We don't want people to remain on preventative medication forever,
Yeah.
right? It's very possible with prolonged treatment that some people may not need that preventative treatment anymore.
Wow, that's amazing. Is
Yep.
that a part of the whole neuroplasticity that's become so popular?
That's a great term for it. Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the brain's ability to kind of adjust
Yeah.
and grow and create new pathways, and
Yeah.
it's incredible. Absolutely incredible. I
Yeah.
could talk to you forever, Dr. Smith. However, greatly appreciate your knowledge, and thank you so much for the insight. I really hope we've helped some people today.